This week in My Hero Academia, Chapter 193 really offered us some great stuff. We got to learn more about the history of One for All and All for One, and that is something that I personally value quite a lot in this story, because One for All is the power that is being used by the main character, and we do know that this power has a history. So learning more about that history and what actually happened right at the time when the original One for All user got his quirk, it is something that I think could be of great value to both to us readers for curiosity reasons, but also for the story to progress in the right way. Now, if there is a power that doesn't have a history, then maybe, learning of said history isn't so important because there isn't really that much to dig into. But when it comes to One for All, the situation is that, it has a lot to talk about. It's just that we don't know about it, so we can't really discuss much of it until now. In this week's chapter, we got to learn more about exactly what went down between All for One and his brother. Izuku Midoriya, he got an explanation from All Might as to what he thought happened way back when, because that's what his master told him. But as it turns out, and I kind of touched on this in my prediction a few days ago, what All Might was told isn't necessarily the full picture, and there's a lot stuff missing, which Deku actually says in this chapter. He said that this is nothing like what All Might told me, which implies that there's a lot of information that Deku found out now that he didn't previously know. Like, he knew the incomplete and short version, which All Might told him, which is probably because All Might didn't know more than what he actually told Deku. I don't think All Might kept anything from him on purpose, of course. I think it's just that as information is passed down, things are lost along the way. And it's a shame really, because this is stuff that Deku really may have had great use in knowing before. That said though, there's nothing to do about it, but now he actually got the opportunity to have an encounter with the original One for All user, which is probably going to be to his advantage for future purposes. I don't really know in what way, but as we know from the last page of this chapter, there is something going on with Deku. I don't really know if there's like a fast forward or if this is as fluid as the chapter was, because when the dream supposedly ends at the end of the chapter, it looks like Deku is wearing his jumpsuit, lying in his bed, and his room is just trashed. Like, it is a mess. Now, I think he went to bed in his jumpsuit or tracksuit, whatever it's called, but the fact that his room is such a mess, that's not really how he left it. And we did hear a big bang sound from Aoyama's end of things. So obviously there was a big event going down in Deku's room, probably while he was sleeping, and that's how Izuku Midoriya then woke up. Now, one thing that I want to really mention, but it's not really important, is that one of the underlings of All for One in this chapter that we saw, the guy who was previously quirkless, who was given a quirk by All for One in this chapter, the one with the drill spikes coming out of his skin, that's actually a quirk that Horikoshi's assistant came up with. And Horikoshi did say, I believe it was in volume 16 or 17, that he wanted to use some of the villain designs that his assistant made up. And of course, this is one of them. It's not the exact same character that we saw his assistant draw, but it is the same quirk. So I'm really happy to see that, at least to some level, that design made it into the story, even if it was only for a minor character like an underling of All for One. Now, what's so interesting about this dream that Deku is having, of course, is also that he can't really interact in any sort of way by the looks of things. He can only really observe. He can't talk. He can't move the majority of his body. He is having some kind of, I don't really know if you could brush it off as sleep paralysis, probably not, but let's use that term just to simplify things, because obviously he can't really interact. He can only look. He can barely move. Only his hand is movable, I believe, and obviously he can move around his eyes and stuff, and the scenery seems to be changing for him because he is experiencing what the original One for All user went through, probably, and all of the previous holders of One for All seem to be next to Deku on some level, at least at the beginning of the chapter. I'm not quite sure if they're actually there all the way through. So Deku doesn't really have any kind of control in this chapter, he's just there to see what happened, and obviously the original One For All user, in some way, I don't really know how this works, but he wanted to send a message to, I guess this is something that probably all of the One For All users go through at some point. They see this dream and it is the original user trying to tell them something. In Deku's case, it's something to do with this quirk because he specifically says that Deku can control only 20%, which means that it is in some way a sentient dream that can pinpoint who this user is and how strong he or she is, which I find to be very interesting. Like for instance with All Might, it was said that he could control the power a lot faster than Deku could, I believe, so the dream would probably have been a bit different for him if he had it at all. This might even be a dream that only really happens to those who have more difficulty with the quirk, like Deku. So I just thought that was really interesting how the original user really reached out to whoever is having the dream, even though they've never spoken. The only thing they really have in common is the fact that they want to do things right and they have the same quirk. Throughout the dream we also see a glimpse of what the society is like when it's led by All For One, because we really see how everything is pretty much in ruin and All For One is really giving some nasty vibes. Like you can really tell things are not what they're supposed to be. It is a society led by villains and All For One is at the center of everything. He is the one that's rallying all of these people who believe in him, despite the fact that all he's really doing is manipulating and getting people to do what he wants them to do, and if they don't agree with his way, well, he even said in this chapter, if things don't go as he plans it to go, he won't take any risks and he will kill them. So you can really tell that there is a strong dictatorship vibe coming from All For One, despite the fact that he is saying that what he does is for the greater good, when it really isn't. This is something we knew, but now we actually get to see it rather than just hearing about it, which I think is another thing that this chapter really does great justice. It really shows us rather than just tells us what actually happened all of those years ago. Now, one thing that I want to talk about when it comes to this dream that Deku is having is whether this dream is the full picture or if we're gonna get a continuation of this dream, because the way I interpreted this dream was not that it's finished, but that Horikoshi wanted to cut this off for us readers specifically so that we wouldn't get to know exactly what Deku found out from the original user One For All, because it felt like he was gonna tell Deku something and it just cut off and we don't know what he said, and then we fast forward to a point when Deku is waking up and you see his room is completely trashed. So I'm wondering if there's some important information that will lead to Deku entering the next stage of One For All, so to speak, because it really looked like Deku had something going when he woke up. Like that was something new from how he usually operates One For All. Like you could see burn marks at places, you could see some marking on his arms that didn't really look like the usual full cowl marks that he usually have on his body. So I'm wondering if this dream subconsciously triggered something in Deku and maybe he can tap into his power quite soon. But consciously speaking, he probably won't be able to do this for a while. I think this is something that will require training. He may know the key to actually finding it within himself, but whether he can actually just activate it, I think that's gonna be something that's gonna take a little bit longer than just knowing about it. You know, subconscious activation and conscious activation, these are totally different, and even this subconscious activation of whatever the hell went down in this chapter, it didn't really look like things were in control. It definitely seemed like things were in dire need of taming. So it's gonna be interesting to see if that's what the arc's actually gonna be about, whether Deku's gonna have to learn how to control this power, and maybe he'll get more help throughout more sequences of One For All's previous users. It might even not be limited to the original One For All users. Like we might get to see more of Nana, we might get to see some of the others that we have never seen before, especially the two people that we only saw the silhouette of, because I feel like they were actually being left out for a reason. Like I think we don't know what they look like because they're gonna be important in some way, or it's because those two characters have some kind of darkness surrounding them or something else. Like I feel there has to be some reason why only two were being shown as silhouettes while we have some of the users we've never seen before being completely shown to us, even though we don't know anything about them either. Anyway, I'm going to be ending this review here. I hope you liked this chapter. I sure did. I thought it was a really interesting chapter. Gave us a lot of information about the history of One for All and All for One, especially a more detailed version of what we already knew, because we knew some details, but now we got everything in between as well. Especially the part with how the original One for All user got his quirk, because we were just told that the brother gave it to him, but now we know exactly why he gave it to him. We know exactly how it went down. Well, not exactly, but we know a lot more than we previously did. So yeah, I would love to know what you guys think down below in the comments, and as always, if you did, be sure to Detroit smash that like button if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. This has been Chaotic Plus, and remember everybody, toga is waifu, toga is life food, despite being pansexual.